and Achichus has announced the funding that it's received from the new Combo plan.
Yeah, that's right. So 1.59 million of the 2025 round, which will support 228 students from the consortium's 17 Australian members to study in Indonesia in 25 and 26.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your co-host, Rob Malicki, coming today from Garigal Land on the eastern side of Sydney.
And g'day, I'm Dirk, Mulder, CEO and founder and CEO of the Koala News. I'm coming to you on the west side of Sydney in Dirk country.
I feel like we're balancing things out, Dirk.
I think we are. East and west, yin and yang.
Mate, there are rumblings out there in the electorate that an election is looming up sometime soon. At time of recording, we just had the announcement yesterday that the Reserve Bank has cut interest rates by 0.25%, which takes a little bit of the sting out of inflation again and makes us think that maybe an election's on the way. We're not really talking too much about that today, but just a broad idea, man. Like, what do you think's going to happen in the next couple of months?
Yeah, mate, I think you're absolutely right. The one thing that I keep hearing people mention is the government's holding on to this rate reduction. So they've now got it. How much momentum they get off the back of it will really determine, I think, when the election will be called. And I've heard it could be as early as next week, where the Prime Minister will visit the Lodge, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting time. The interesting thing, I think, with the 0.25% of a percentage point rate cut, while good news for the government, I say this because I've never really followed, if I can be honest, monetary policy of the Reserve Bank in their meetings. But on this occasion, obviously, it drew some attention. And Tracy Harris wrote this up in the Koala. It was mentioned in the Reserve Bank, I want to say quarterly, September quarter review, that export growth was weaker than expected and that education exports were actually mentioned. And that's, for me, that's kind of a big one, right? Like when you've got the Reserve Bank mentioning that education exports were weaker due to tightening student visa requirements and an unexpected decline in the average expenditure of international students, you've got to start thinking all the things that we've been talking about for the last 12 months about capping students. And if there's less students, there's less consumption and how will that affect the economy? It looks like the Reserve Bank's sitting up and taking note.
Who would have thought, Dirk? They've been listening to us. It took a little bit of time for it to flow through, but I think we give ourselves a pat on the back there for that one.
Absolutely. What do we need? Like a little ball, a little crystal ball and a little Nostradamus hat? I'm not sure.
Yeah, one of the things I've sort of thought about the whole interest rate stuff is that the Reserve Bank was clearly way too slow to actually start raising rates when inflation was starting to boom towards the end of the pandemic, considered very much transitory. And I kind of feel it's the same now. They've let it run a heck of a long way. Inflation's back in target bands and they're pouring cold water on the idea of there being multiple rate cuts. Those of us in the industry that know what's coming in the next 12 months because of this debacle with the whole international students cap stuff, we know it's going to hit the real economy. I don't think you need an economics degree to figure that out, to be quite honest.
I'm going to stick my neck out here and say I actually think the government's got itself to blame for this. And what I mean by that, and it's not just about economic management, but the way the former governor of the Reserve Bank was treated after his predictions and the economy pivoting very, very quickly. He was kind of kicked in the backside or drop kicked out of there pretty quickly. You can't blame Michelle Bullock for being conservative around this stuff.
Yeah.
And, that messaging, you don't want to be too bullish because if things do change and this, in this day and age, 3 months or a quarter is a long time, you wouldn't want to be on record for saying we're anticipating this and then suddenly things change and you've got to pull things back. So I think the messaging from the Reserve Bank over the next few years, particularly, is going to be on the conservative side of things.
You're probably right. They have raised the uncertain outlook for international student enrollments in 2025 and saying that some prospective students are preferring to apply to other countries given the high level of uncertainty. Right. Do you want to talk a little bit more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably nothing that we haven't spoken about. Yeah, no surprise. It's probably nothing that we haven't spoken about in previous podcasts. But, one of the things that I think the sector feels and one of the things that has been a byproduct of everything that's going on is that Brand Australia has been if you're a student that's offshore, you are now facing higher visa fees. You're experiencing a visa process which is more inconsistent than what it was. It's more subjective than what it was. And now that Ministerial Direction 111 has been applied, if you read between the lines, you're not sure when the handbrake's going to be applied to any applications that might go to an institution that's met its 80% threshold. So if I can say a source, and we kind of agreed that we've kicked the can down the road on MD 111 somewhat. It was announced in December. Some institutions are saying visas are moving okay for us. What's going to happen when, the Department of Home Affairs realises that X university has reached its cap? And by the time they actually realise, and I hate to say this because this is tongue-in-cheek type stuff because you don't know what processes actually sit behind here. Is there somebody monitoring this stuff on a daily basis? Is it a weekly basis, a monthly basis? By the time this happens and the memo gets sent out to all the posts that, University X is now at 82% because they've overshot, you're not going to get it right on 80. What happens? Do they just apply the handbrake? And I know, the political response to that would be, well, they move to, a phase 2 type of environment where it's a standard processing regime. But in practicality, if you're sitting in Beijing or Delhi and you're processing visas and you've got someone who's just hit their cap, what does that mean? It means you're not processing that right now, right? Mm-hmm. So what are the systems that sit behind that? How will that fall out? And I would expect that sometime in between, I would say, April and August, we're going to start seeing a lot more of this if MD111 is maintained in its current way.
I suspect it's going to be the proverbial duck sitting on the lake with the legs under the water going like this. At home, my hands are going like two little duck feet under the water going crazy. Absolutely. I think they're just going to be there. The Home Affairs is just going to basically be winging it. And look, a little bit later in the episode, we're going to have special guest Naresh Gulati, who's going to join us from Ascent One and BPO fame. Maybe we can pick his brain on a couple of these things too. Moving on though, so there's some interesting data that you guys have been sharing on population.
Yeah, that's right. So the 2024 population statement was released by the Population Centre, I believe it was. Gordon Scott and Christopher Pitt wrote this one up. And it all came from one graph, if I can be honest. I kind of picked up on this graph, and the graph is of the number of temporary visa holders in Australia. And it was fascinating to me. So you'd be mistaken, I guess, to think that international students, by and far, the biggest category, they're the ones that we need to stem the flow of the most, et cetera, et cetera. It's incredible. I mean, outside of the data that was presented in the story, I've sought some extra data, and I thank Tracy Harris for that. If you look at essentially all of those categories, New Zealand citizens are actually 32% of our NOM. And that's 700,000 New Zealand citizens are on a temporary visa in Australia. So that's a massive group, right? And I'm not, I certainly don't want to cast aspersions as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It just is. That's a fact. The next group at 23% is students, and that's at the December figures at 0.52 of a million. And then you've got a whole range which essentially gets grouped together as other. Now, in the other category, this is the really fascinating thing. If you take that whole other category and put it together, it's more than students. So from my way of thinking, we've been on this kind of view. And if you were to speak to Joe Public or Bob Mainstream, he'd be saying it's international students that are the cause of this blowout in the NOM and et cetera, et cetera. Possibly not the case is what this data is telling me. If you look over from September 12 all the way up to September 24, you can see international students grow consistently and much higher than the other category. And then it drops off through COVID and it comes back, as we know, in a substantial growth rate. And it's a good one. If you look at this graph, the other category sits roughly between 400 and 450,000 the entire time up until COVID. Then all of a sudden it drops off. But what we've seen is the growth rate out of that all other categories surpass the international student growth rate and surpass the international student numbers to the point where on this graph, it looks like international students as of September 24 are just below 700,000, with all others being above 700,000, probably 725-ish by the look of the graph. So that's really amazing.
They're impressive numbers. So those people listening along, just to kind of restate that, we're talking about net overseas migration, so number of students coming in, number of people coming in on different types of visas. And what Dirk's saying there is that students, 500,000 odd students coming in, or up to 700,000 more or less at the time, but then all the others, so people on bridging visas, working holiday makers, temporary graduates, and skilled entry and other, essentially are more than students. So, we're talking about students. Don't you think that that's just a psychological bias though, Dirk? It's so much easier just to pick on the one big category and say these guys are the problem rather than then cherry picking and saying, oh, well, we need to reduce working holiday makers. We need to reduce people on bridging visas and the like. I mean, there you got to do a heck of a lot more work to try and explain that.
So this is a really interesting point, right? So if you look at all of these categories, and we can go through them one by one, but the holiday maker is the really interesting one. So I don't have any longitudinal data beyond 2019. But in 2019, it looked like working holiday visas were around the 150,000 mark.
Mm.
That's now gone up to 250,000. So an increase of 100,000 over that time.
Yeah.
What concerns me, and I've spoken to a couple of people about this, and it seems fairly consistent. The working holiday category isn't an easy one to actually be able to move around. And the reason for that is that working holiday visas are often tacked onto economic cooperation agreements, bilateral trade agreements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are baked in and they're not able to be turned down. But if you're looking at it from a management point of view, when you think about growth, there has been growth in categories other than the students that have been much greater percentage-wise than what students have been over the last few years. And from an international education perspective, I think we've been somewhat remiss with not being able to point that out in a way, which essentially not necessarily deflect from our sector, but says, there's a wider problem here as well. It's not just students. And so again, when we talk about, working holiday makers, when we talk about New Zealand citizens, I don't think there's an appetite to turn any of that down. But if we have a NOM problem, we should be talking about NOM solutions, not just student solutions.
That sounds like a holistic solution, Dirk. That would be almost like an unreasonable demand, I think.
I know. It's an interesting one though. And again, the international student, again, it's one of those complex arguments where politically, I think it's been probably a decision that has been made somewhere where this is going to be the easiest category. We'll try and tack it on accommodation. We'll try and tack it on to integrity. Oh, that student sector, it's dodgy, it's shonky, it's, you can see now how some of this rhetoric is now coming about, because who's going to want to go back to, the United States or to France or to the UK and start talking about, backpacker visas being canned out of economic cooperation agreements. And given Australia's history on sending our own abroad for backpacking and, wandering around Europe or Canada in the ski fields for a year or so, nobody's going to have much of an appetite to turn that one down either. So I understand the context, I understand the decisions, but the poor old international education sector seems to have copped the brunt of it when there are discussions to be had elsewhere.
Absolutely. So moving on, Austrade's released the results of their 2024 student sentiment survey. Do you want to dig into this a little bit?
Yeah, they have. Again, Tracy covered this one for the Koala and did a great job on it. Look, we could talk about this till the cows come home, because I think this is where the rubber hits the road. When you start talking to students about student experiences, this is what our entire program should be about: understanding that student experience, building on it where it's weak and reinforcing it where it's strong. Varsha Devi Balakrishnan, Head of Student Insights and Strategy at Voyage, told Tracy a quote, and I'll read the quote because I think it sums up the article really, really well without having to go back into too much more detail. She said, ongoing policy uncertainty and visa restrictions are creating significant barriers to post-study employment and migration pathways, leaving many students questioning their investment in an Australian education. So again, Rob, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The top three concerns outside of study for students, however, remain the same as 2023, being financial pressures, employment pressures, and accommodation issues, noting there was some reduction in the scale of concern for all three. So you might be able to say out of that, yeah, they're still there, but the pressure's coming off a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. He goes on to say, compounding these concerns, tuition fees for international students rise by an average 3.3 to 5% per year. Aren't aware of these creeping costs due to the sheer number of factors they must consider when deciding to study abroad. This financial strain builds up over time, and they simultaneously tackle the rising cost of living. So you get a picture there that essentially for most of all the metrics look pretty good for an Australian experience. There's some pressures there around employment, accommodation and financial. So we need to take heed of those and look at how we can support those. The big one is really around those barriers to post-study employment and migration pathways, which, look, again, if you're the government, you're going to be saying, well, that's precisely what we're wanting to cut. So this is demonstrative proof that what we're doing is working. But yeah, in saying that, again, I go back to the point that these sorts of surveys I think are really, really important to look at our program, be able to kind of stand back, look at the data and be able to say, what can we be doing better?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just as you're sort of talking about it, I think this data is really interesting and useful for us. I just don't think it cuts through to Joe Public, as you're sort of saying, referring to earlier. Yeah, I just wonder what we need to do as an industry to do better in terms of being able to share those good stories about how important this is for our country.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Mate, I think the biggest thing is why wouldn't they care, or why would they
Yeah.
care? And I think that's the point that we've got to really demonstrate. And it may not be a student issue, mate. Like, there's financial pressures out there in the community at the moment. There's accommodation pressures out there in the community. So these are items that don't just apply to international students. They apply to the wider community. And maybe it's being able to, have some sort of, Venn diagram to say, what are the issues that overlap community and students, and have the sector be able to run campaigns around, again, arguing for increased building and accommodation. It's not just about students, but it's about the community. What sort of subsidies or how do we tackle, rising costs of things for students?
Absolutely.
How do we talk to institutions about not putting up fees by 5%, but only putting them up by 1.5%? Or, and again, it goes back into those mechanisms around, how do we have a sustainable international education sector? And I think all of these points feed into that narrative really well.
Let's jump across to the other side of international. We're talking about sort of inbound international students, but let's switch tack a little bit and head over to outbound. And Achichus has announced the funding that it's received from the New Colombo plan.
Yeah, that's right. So 1.59 million of the 2025 round, which will support 228 students from the consortium's 17 Australian members to study in Indonesia in 25 and 26. Mate, I think this is really a really outstanding thing. It's funny because I've just been watching some news about America and the money being taken out of the aid program, et cetera, in a medium to long-term investment in Asian literacy, in our engagement, in increasing business development, and increasing bilateral links. This is a really good investment, I think. Having students study on the ground for a period of time, bringing back those connections to Australia, that understanding, and hopefully building longer, medium to long-term connections is a really important thing. 1.5 million is a drop in the ocean for the federal budget. This is a really good one, and congratulations to Achichus for achieving.
And of course, the New Colombo plan paying for scholarships to support students from Australia, so Australian students to go and spend a period of study in the Indo-Pacific region, anything from like a couple of weeks right through, actually 4 weeks is the minimum this year, right through to 19 months for the main scholarship recipients, which is huge. And it's a $50 million investment from the Australian government. And now is bipartisanly supported, given that it was launched under the former coalition government and has been carried forward over this term of government by the Labor Party, which is very positive. It's great to see that level of support from both sides of politics to Australia's soft power in the region, getting our young people out there.
Absolutely.
Let's jump out of our backyard and to the other side of the world and talk about what's going on in Berlin, mate.
Yeah, so Navitas has announced that they are opening a new school in Berlin in partnership with SRH University. And mate, this one really stood out to me because it weaves into a pattern of something that we've been discussing for quite some time, and that's about how the UK, Canada and Australia particularly have gotten the wobbles over the last 12 months. And what we've been seeing out of student choice surveys is students from Asia choosing other destinations over our traditional destinations, okay, Canada, the UK and Australia. Germany has been the number one of the newcomers, if I can put it that way. So this one is a practical example. It's an exclamation point on all of that data that we've been seeing over the last little bit. And Navitas, putting their money where their mouth is and saying, we see Germany as a market too. So here's an example, like a tangible example of a global company started in little old Perth with one school at Edith Cowan, which has grown to a global conglomerate, which is now looking at Germany, which arguably, if all these things weren't going on, would they be doing that? So I think this is a point in time where you've got to sit up. They do have another school, I have to say, I think it's in Leipzig. So this is number 2 in Germany for them. But this is a point in time where you've got to sit up and say, Big 4, Big 5.
Yeah, Navitas is one of the massive success stories out of Australia, not just in terms of international education provision, but like full stop for a business, listed on a stock exchange, global footprint. I mean, huge success. I've been trying to get Rod Jones and Peter Larson on the podcast. I'd love to dig into
That'd be a good one.
Watch this space, ladies and gentlemen, or listen to this space. I'm just keep following them up, keep sending them messages. And one day, gents, if you're listening, or someone who knows them's listening, tell them that I'd love to get under the hood of that story, because I'm sure it's an absolute cracker. Maybe just to finish up, let's jump back home to Sydney. And this one's a little bit close to home. When you sent it through on our potential run sheet, I went, oh, this actually could kind of apply to my new company choosing your uni.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. Study New South Wales, in conjunction with Business Events Sydney, has announced that the EduTech Congress and Expo will return to Sydney as its home for 2025, 26 and 27. And that's really good news for Sydney. It's good news for Australia. It was interesting because obviously I see a bit of the data behind it when I start researching stories or people send me information. I was amazed. New South Wales has 273 edtech companies, 39% of Australia's total, employ 7,300 people, and generated, wait for it, you're sitting down, 1.4 billion in annual revenue. I always knew edtech was big and it was growing. I had no idea it was that big and it was that influential. So kudos to Sydney and to Study New South Wales and Business Events Sydney for attracting the expo. And yeah, let's really hope that it finds a home for the longer term and that 1.4 billion continues to grow and students can take advantage of some of the wonderful advances in edtech that are being generated in New South Wales.
Excellent. Now, for those people listening along at home, this is attempt number 3, which happens sometimes when you're recording. People don't get to see this side of things. But Dirk, what do you reckon? Shall we bring in our guest?
For the third time? Absolutely. Let's give it a crack. Naresh Gulati, welcome to the Global Horizons Koala News podcast. As we were tinkering around trying to get this to work, we were chatting in the background. We've probably known each other for about 20 years now, which, gosh, that seems like an eternity ago. I first met you probably back when you were running or started even Oceanic Consultants, a recruitment firm out of India. I know your successes through BPO Intelligence, and you're now onto your third major venture, Ascent One. Tell us a little bit about your journey, mate. How did you get into international education and what are some of the highlights along your journey? Because for most people who do know you, you're probably one of the main edupreneurs of the sector, if I can put it that way.
Well, thanks, Dirk. Well, indeed, it's been 20 years, right? So time flies, isn't it? Even interesting, you're taking me down the memory lane and you're coming into my head, which I haven't thought of for a long time. And I'd love to share with the audience and, we call the news as to how I got into this. This is my entry to the education industry has been excellent. I won't pick any other credit. That's not my journey. I was 15 when I started my first venture in India. I used to sell candles on the roadside, and that was my first venture. I don't know, maybe I was a born entrepreneur or marketer and risk taker. So I would buy candles from Delhi and come from a city called Chandigarh in India, and I'll sell you there or Diwali. But in those 5 days, I would make enough money to buy the clothes for my next year. And that's what my first venture was. It was very unusual during those times for the kids of 15 years age to be working in India, and the culture was not there. And I'm talking about 85 or 86, right? So this back, obviously, you can work out my age now. Don't look that old, but yeah, you can work on my age. I was never good at academics. I failed in my year 10, and then I failed in my year 11. Then year 12, I managed to pass with 45.7% marks. I still remember 45.7% marks. And coincidentally, I was talking to my son last night. He sent me his transcriptions. He's in India, saying that he wants to in Australia, and obviously that's where he wants to come and study. We have not been talking of late a lot, but then with me, he said, Papa, I want to come and study in Australia. I said, okay. I asked him, what's your score? He's got 7.83 GPA over 8. I said, man, if you combine my year 10 and 12 together, I still don't make that much. The world has changed. So I was never into academics, if I just say that to you. It was not until I got into IT and suddenly an unused brain is put to use. I got a kick of solving the problems. The things which I saw brought out some different person inside. Out of me, put it this way. I was the only person who got admission in that institute, in the computer center, through influence. I had zero academic background to even qualify. But here's the story which turns. I was the best performing student amongst the engineers, all of them. No background to be a student there. I passed. I did pretty good with it there, and I got a job as a lecturer in a computer center. And that was my IT job. I was getting 2,026 rupees a month. In today's exchange, about $40 a month. And that's, I'm talking about 94, 92, 93, 94. Mentioned that. And I was happy. I would solve problems. I do crazy stuff with the computers. It all worked, and I worked very well. And then I I had a small relationship with one of the girls at the same institute where I was teaching. Because I was not well off and I couldn't speak English. Socially, I was not somebody who would look up to me coming from a different culture. So it was interesting. And that one philosophy in my life. Anything which is happening in your life, it is for our own good. It is never going to go against you. It's just a matter of time before we find it. I decided to come to Australia. Now, my father at that time was on 2,300 rupees a month working as a salesman and in a shop. And I said, Dad, I want to go overseas. He said, go son, I'll arrange the money. He borrowed 200,000 rupees of a private financer for 3% interest, which is 6,000 rupees interest. The guy took 6,000 out and gave 194,000 rupees to my dad. I put that money into bank. I used an agent to come to Australia. You need to come to you got a high commission, did medicals today, and then you're going to get the visa. I'm going to fly tonight. I bought new clothes. I did not. I left the packing at home just in case I don't get the visa. I will come back and return that stuff, right? Because I bought it from my same shop where my dad used to work. I went to Delhi and I feel like first person in whole client to come to leave India. And I was like, as if I'm going somewhere. I don't know. I look back and I laugh at myself. I was wearing black suit, white shirt and red tie in an economy class, sitting there thinking, I don't know where I've come there. And I could not speak English. And I was scared, petrified. To my bad luck, there was an Aussie sitting to my left and feet and with a proper accent, Sunday Monday. I'm the one who doesn't even understand English. And then I'm sitting to a guy who's talking about Sunday, Monday, and I was like, holy moly, I've got a bit of a challenge here. And the tray comes in front of me. Instead of putting sugar, I was so petrified, I put salt in. I didn't realize those sessions. There's a couple of different things, right? So I put salt in that teacup. And I kid you not, I was so scared. I had the cup of tea, thinking people would notice that I put the wrong thing in it. Who the hell is coming in? But I had that. That's the story of an international student. And we must acknowledge and understand, just getting a student here is not what is in Australia is the game. It's a game changing. The value will bring to changing life. Australia changed my life. I came here. I landed at the airport. And this is a very funny story. My luggage is lost. I go to the baggage service, coming from India first time, and the lady at the counter said, when did you fly? And all I could say is, pardon? She goes, when did you fly? I said, please write. She wrote on a piece of paper, when did I fly? I said, you mean, when did I fly? She goes, that's what I said. And she was kind enough. She said, look, what was there? I explained to her whatever I could explain. And she gave me $100. She goes, we apologize, your luggage has gone to Sydney, and here's $100 for you. And coming from a culture, the same incident happened that time. Somebody to find my luggage. Now I'm perplexed and I'm confused what's happening. I asked her, do I need to give it back to out of innocence to you? She goes, no, sir, this is for you to buy something in the meantime. I did cry, actually. That was a very emotional moment for me. My friend came out, picked me up. I traveled, and it was in February 95. And then what happened was, he said, we went out to buy some vegetables. He forgot to bring money. He said, have it on you? I said, yeah. He said, I'll give it back to you. We gave the $100 to the guy who bought the vegetables. We bought for $10. Instead of giving $90, he gave me $110 back. I said, geez, this is a strange country. Airport, they give me $100 and I give $100, they give me this back. I said, my dad and my family taught me never keep anybody's money. I said, sorry, you're giving me $20. You're an honest man. That's how the journey in Australia started to me. That was the first day an Indian restaurant called Go to the Dhaba doing dishwashing. Never had done the work in India. My shift was from 4 o'clock to 11:30 at night. I was getting $35 plus a butter chicken or any dish I wanted. And that was $5 an hour. And that's their first exploitation started. But I did not know the exploitation. I, in the hindsight, can think of that. And I tell you, a lot of Indian students or overseas students, not Indian, I would say, a lot of international students still face that in the society. That's one part. And why I'm sharing the story is, it is going to lead to where I am today. It is all because of Australia and resilience and I would say honesty pays. And that's how I class it. One day at the restaurant, I was doing dishwashing and the guy said, here's a bucket full of onions, chop them. And there I am chopping with the tears coming out of my eyes with that thing. India regarding household chores. And there I am. Of course, few tears came along with the tears caused by the onion, because he gave me this big container full of gravy with a bloody 1 inch of oil. He said, just take the oil away. Very painful. To lift that big container slipped out of my hand and it went under the sack of flour. Now, that guy screamed at me. He fired me. When I came here only for one reason, to be successful. And I was sent by an agent. An agent told me, you are a computer professional. You go and rent a computer, do the data entry. Every week you'll make this much money. I calculated it fitted in the school. But this was the different world. I was getting $35. I was living in Melbourne, studying in Melbourne, working in Melbourne, Collingwood, and Johnson Street. And then going and living in cab work cost. And my daily earning was $35. Once I slept, what happened was there was a Indian bowl going on, and there was a late night and restaurant was busy. My last trip was 12:14. The restaurant guy did not let me go until 12:30. I slept out on a bench, only for one reason, because I would have had to shell out the $30 I earned. And that's the journey of an international student who comes on a misled promises, right? Or false promises. And why I'm putting this story out there, so that anybody who's any audience from universities, the students or agents who all are seeing, and even any government officials, this is a story of an international student. It happens every day, every city, everywhere in the world. And this happens to the migrants as well. It is the same story. People, some say, some share, some don't. He fired me. I got a job at 7-Eleven. I have stories at 7-Eleven, right? That we'll leave it for some other time. But that's interesting experience there as well. I studied at RMIT. I passed with distinction. I got a job while I was working from Indian restaurant. I went to 7-Eleven. I went to computer services group at RMIT. That's where I studied. I passed with distinction. I did my grand diploma. And before I even finished my last exam on 16th of November, 95, that's when fresh, I got a job offer from the data cells, the Lotto game. I worked on Powerball front end. And that's where my IT journey in Australia, real job. I was working with computer services group, but this was real programming job. When I was studying, I was homeless as well. Place where I was staying, I was told to leave. I moved in for 4 guys in Footscray. I struggled there. With a suitcase, I was on the road. And that's okay. That's a part of journey. That's all part of making, right? The providence is making us, molding us into be more resilient human being. I met so many students who would cry. They were probably not as resilient or blessed or as lucky I was. They would cry, and they had a lot of money. I know a lot of students who committed suicide because of a financial crisis. My good luck and bad luck was the same. The bridges to go to India were burnt because my dad borrowed money. There's no way he could have paid the money. I had to earn the money to pay that off. I would queue up Hungry Jack's, get a coupon, buy 2 Whoppers, get 2 free. If anybody knows and managers would recognize, they will automatically start giving me that. I was working from in the evening at 9 o'clock until next morning, straight away go to university, study hours. It happened over 1.5 years. Year of study, wow. But I paid my fee. I could not pay my fee. 7-Eleven landlord, his name was Kenny. I don't know where he is. I said, Kenny, I need to borrow money. I need 2,000. I'm short of money. He took care of me. And he said, Naresh, in our culture, we never let the money like that. But you're a good man, I'll give you. I said, I'll give you before Christmas. I gave him 6 days before Christmas to return his money. He said, to be honest, Naresh, I had written off that money. I said, no, he never does that. So when I met students, a part of me when I was working with data science, always thought, I need to help the students. There is so much more than that. And that's where the idea to start Oceania Consultants. And I started Oceania Consultants. I got my first representation with Deakin University and Holmes-Linton and RMIT. RMIT is very close to my heart because that's where a part of me was created, right? And that was created from working at school, teaching me the real life, teaching me the culture. And I'll tell you, in India, if you have been in India, or if any of the audience you've been to India, you will appreciate this fact. A lot of you may not understand, but something for you, everybody to know. I was in India If there was a party of friends come for a birthday party, everybody would not contribute. Only the person inviting, he pays for it. Here I'm struggling with money. Colleagues say, hey, let's go, it's your birthday, let's go there. I go there. There's somebody else's birthday. And I go there. It's my birthday, let's go. Everybody's going to tag along. I said, I'm going to have the most expensive dish on the menu. The greedy me came out. I bought the most expensive dish there and I ate 2 of them at $20. And when the bill came, everybody was looking at marking their own and putting their money. And I looked at the guy, I said, what's happening here? He said, everybody's paying for money. I said, but you guys called me. He said, no, everybody pays for themselves. I said, I don't even have money. I can't even afford me. This everybody got to pay back. That was bad, right? So I have so many of these stories, but I'll tell you for some other day. But that's where I started. I decided to help students, and I started this agency from one student in the February 97 semester to 3 students in July 97 semester to going in 2000. They're doing about 2,700 from Punjab alone. That's what the journey has been. We never charged them. We always put students ahead. Not even a single case of fraud ever in the history of Oceanic Consultants. Non-ethically, not even a single episode, because money was never the focus. The focus was the student. Money was incidental to. From there, one office, I had 32 company-owned offices across India. I became one of the largest agency in India. I was getting bored. Something in me was dying. I was getting bored. Sitting at Melbourne office, my cousin's place, living there. I thought, this is boring. I need to do something new. And I'm sharing my journey with the audience here. I sat down and I said, you know what? I need to do something more. I was earning $1 million a month, literally. And I said, this is boring. And I started BPO on that particular day when I thought I need to do something creative. I said, I know the universities, I know the industry. The problem is they're giving me the brochure if I order after 4 weeks. It takes me to get the material. It's insane. There's a problem. Oh, no, there's not. Actually, that's what I told myself. I printed the brochure, printed the cards, rented an OHP. They used to be projector, made the transparencies, presented to Homeland. That was my first client. I got the order in this university. And the rest is history today. Almost every single provider in Australia uses us. We are the largest in the world in the marketing support business and the education. And with that, I saw so many problems from the university sector came birth to Ascent One. Ascent One is actually truly solving the problem, and it is the world's first ecosystem. And I'll tell you more during the session. But if you want, I can give a quick one. Typically, the universities have a problem where there's so many softwares running around. So many of them, like scattered like dogs' breakfast. Everything is achieving one objective, but nothing is talking to each other. But at the same time, it deletes them automatically. That's the world's first ecosystem. Affordable, scalable, whenever you want to go another module, and we keep on solving the problems, adding new modules. And that's Ascent One journey. Industry has been very kind to me, and I'm very grateful to people like you, Dirk, who have recognized, and many university, pro vice chancellor directors. They appreciate and acknowledge what we do, and it feels good coming from a different country. Australia has given a lot. It's created a new person in me. Australia is home, and I love being here.
Naresh, that is an amazing journey from going to selling things on the side of the road to being an edupreneur with, as you were saying, earning $1 million a month. Like, that is incredible. Changing countries and all the aspects of cultural change, everything that you've said about being an international student. You've been in the sector quite some time now, and you've started writing and you've become more of a thought leader. Tell us about what, in your view, the last 12 months, obviously, has been a bumpy one for the sector. What's your take on it, and how do you think we're going to come out of it over the next little bit?
Last 12 months, I would say, or 18 months have been certainly most uncertain phase in the industry, with different contradictory views being floating around, from capping to no capping to indirect capping. That's one classic example. No commissions for onshore students. I feel this is only done is damage the reputation of Australia as a destination. Now, anybody who's coming to Australia, we also carried out a survey. Most of the students wanted to make Australia home. And that's a very good thing for Australia as well. People come and pay for their own study, skill themselves, and then stay here. But once In the whole bargain, when you say capping to no capping to indirect capping or no commission for the students and a lot of other initiatives, I think the intent behind this was right, but approach was wrong in my viewpoint, and that's something very important. I want to clearly demark.
Tease that out for us. What do you mean by that?
Put it this way: there were 40 colleges. They said there were shonky colleges or dodgy colleges. They wanted to shut down. There was all over the news, right? But anybody explain? Did they realize overnight? No, this has been brewing for years. So one day you realize and say, I'm going to do this. I think there's a political motive. Capping was sending a wrong signal against international students, saying that they are causing housing crisis. That's not true. That's not even remotely true, right? When that's not true, you suddenly decide to do something, and who gave them the licenses? If I get a driver's license, is it my fault I've got a driver's license? Your process is broken. You've given them the licenses. Or at the time of licenses, you've done something. What have you done for monitoring? What you let it grow for years, and one day you wake up and say, no, that's not true. That is not fair. Not fair, even though that if you even deem them dodgy practice by mere existence for so long, you have accepted it. You've given an impression of accepting it. The real thing is there has to be an ongoing monitoring. There has to be a lot of world has changed. We are not living in the manual ECOE processes. We've got digital world now. We should have access to the information data feeding from these colleges, if you got from the providers on regular basis, which highlights certain key metrics. And those metrics would give an absolute alert to the providers straight away that this is where the problem is from the agents. And there could be metrics from providers to the government like Texas and NESCO as well, that this data is coming. This is where the trends are, how many visa retention, how many visa cancellation. Don't wait for 10 years, 15 years or 4 years. It should happen monthly basis. That's the reality. Now, other angle, I also agree with government's philosophy, and I completely, I'm all in for it. But approach, I don't agree. We want Australia to be Australia quality education destination. Absolutely in it. We would not have any other way, because any student who studies here, if I talk about myself, I created employment, I contribute to the economy. I'm the ambassador. I'm the ambassador for the country, for RMIT. That's how I look at it. That's where I studied, right? This is where I have made home. But those students who are coming and studying here, they have to be high quality. Our visa system is broken. We have given uncontrolled power to the decision maker. They can say, use one line, the minister is not satisfied. All right, how are you not exactly satisfied, please? You woke up on the wrong side of the bed or what? I have an issue with that. How about you make the visa system transparent and measurable? By measurable, I mean you say, I need finances, because international students are expected to pay for themselves, right? Of course, it is not. A lot of universities are giving scholarship and they've got separate schemes. I really appreciate them because it breaks that myth of making international education accessible only by rich people. So universities are doing on the side what they should be doing, and that's great. That's what we are in Australia. That's who we are as Australians. Come to think of transparency. Why can't we do simple thing? Students have to pay upfront 1-year fee, like Canada did, like New Zealand did. Every month they get a small monthly release of money. They pay upfront 1 year's tuition fee. Now, it's got 2 benefits. That criteria is straight away met because it's your nominated bank. The second thing is you don't have to invest time and resources in assessing this and detecting fraud, because you've created a situation where fraud can happen. This way, you don't need to do anything. That system is automatically fixed. And then the biggest problem why government started investing with these so-called shonky colleges, because there was a lot of course change happening, provider jumping. Why don't you link the visa in a practical way with a provider? If a student changes the provider, he has to go back to his home country and reapply. If he downgrades the course within the same provider from master's to a diploma, a graduate diploma, has to go back to his country and reapply. You will see the retention rate will go out of the roof. We'll have more retention. The quality would be, anybody who's doing fraud would not be able to circumvent this. And then you already have assessment levels in place. That means there's assessment done for particular providers. So you're covering all those things. And then what you do is you also And that's one part from the visa perspective. You also have other thing, right? You get monitoring the visas, which provider, and then that's going back to the original point I said where data feed happens monthly. But in this case, in prisms and other places, government already has the data. If the system start integrating, they would know before even the problem occurs that this provider is having these trends of dropouts. They can look into it proactively, not waking up after years or decades. That's not how the industries are protected. We need to have proactive approach to attracting quality students. It starts, charity begins at home. We have to get our backyard fixed first. Fix the system. Clearly define the requirements. What is meant by a genuine student? Not just hide behind the term genuine student, right? You look at the three actors in the education industry, and that's what I've learned after having spent almost 3 decades in the industry. There are students, there are agents, and there are providers. We'll take the regulatory bodies out. They are the three who are main actors. There are 2 types of students. One, who want to study overseas. Their prime objective is study. That's why the world comes first. They want to study overseas. And this other category who want to go overseas for studies. That means they're using the student visa to abuse the system and get into that country. And the latter one is not good for any country. Second, there are 2 types of providers who teach, who actually need money to teach. All the good universities, what you see, they need money to teach. That's where they rely a lot on international students. And there are others who teach to make money. Semantics change, but changes their whole philosophy and entire look at how they look at this industry. There are 2 providers, 2 actors out of 3, agents, students, and providers. If 2 are dodgy, you got a corrupt system. Third one cannot do it. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we get these systems in place. Get all 3 right. Why should the license be given to the providers and why can't we do the monitoring? All right, you don't have resources. We never have resources. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I'm hearing the same story. 30 years, we don't have the resources. The fee has gone 10 times from when I came. Dollar rate has gone 3 to 2.5 times. When would we have resources? We don't have resources. Let's invest into technology. Get technology to feed the data. Government has taken a great initiative, the PRISM's modernization project, right? I can see the winds of change. The past has been, if you go at a one point in time, Dirk, you mentioned 12 months. If you go just 12 months back, at that point, the decisions were being made for the legacy or the problems created 10 years before that. We are already in the end. There are lessons. It's happened. Past. You can't undo. But the least we could do is take corrective actions today so that tomorrow becomes better. Today's tomorrow is going to be tomorrow's today. We are going to be finding ourselves into the same situation if we don't do something right now. And the right thing is putting the technology in place, data feed, automated monitoring, metrics defined, and providers need to monitor their agents very quickly and very proactively. What is the rate from inquiries to application? What is the conversion rate from application to offers made? If somebody is sending you dodgy applications, you already know they are not translating into offer. We have a problem, right? We already have a warning letter on its way. We should have a warning letter on its way, right? Because it's eating up the resources. And from offers, how many of them accepted? From acceptance, how many translated to the visa? Government's visa system is clearly defined. We will not have rejections. We will not have too many troubles. And I'm not saying government can let go anyone. That's not even, they have the job to do. Border office has their responsibilities. We need to protect our borders. I'm all in for it. We have to have a safe society. Can government assure that they've created a policy which has only attracted the safe society or a genuine steward? The answer is no. You see what is the retention? So if the providers start monitoring from acceptances to visa to retention, how many of them are only graduating, and seeing it with the agents, and they can see which agents are not doing good. Numbers is not the game. A lot of providers have gone for numbers. And there are people who give you numbers, but necessarily not the retention, not the quality students. We need to be very clear on what we want to do and then put these policies in place. And that's what I think.
This is very true.
Yeah,
It's
makes a
very
lot of
true.
sense. Makes a lot of sense. I want to ask, and you don't have to answer this, are you a member of a
Um,
political party? Because I tell you what, there's a federal election coming up, and I reckon both parties would do well to get someone like yourself on board.
I belong to one political party which is called Humanity, and I'm all for that.
Very nice.
To be honest, right? There's nothing better
Very
than
nice.
we all are going to disappear one day from the earth. We should be proud of ourselves, what we do. Let me tell you.
Well, Naresh, it's been a pleasure having you on the Global Horizons Koala News podcast. I think that we've got so much to talk about that we're going to have to get you back. But I just wanted to say a big thank you for coming on. Hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Thank you so very much, guys, for having me. And thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you.
And for those of you listening along at home, of course, thekoalanews.com is the place for you to get all of your Australian, international, and global international education news. What am I doing? I'm only talking about Australia. All your international education news, and jump on LinkedIn as well. That's my favourite place to get a good taste of what's going on in the industry. Koala's always putting out articles via LinkedIn, so you can get them one by one, which I love because it just keeps you right up to date. Until next time, Dirk, great to chat as always. I hope you have a good weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rob. You too.
See you next time.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all of the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garigal land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.